Welcome back to the channel, guys. You joined me here at Response Motors for the GT3 build. Now, we've gotten a lot of progress done on this GT3. We've got the front end installed, we've got those rocker panels done, this thing's pretty much stripped out, but today we're gonna start welding. So we've got a lot of structural welds to do along the bottom and the inside, which I'm gonna show you. But before we jump to that, it's worth mentioning that this is actually episode 11 of the build, which I can't believe. So if you haven't seen the other episodes, check out our YouTube page, go to the GT3 playlist, and you can see all of the progress thus far, which is cool to check out. And I also want to mention that a lot of people have been asking me about if I'm selling the parts from our parts car. Yes, we are. We're actually selling everything we don't need up on eBay. I'll put a link in the description below. If you're looking for those bucket seats, I'm sorry to say those are already gone, but pretty much everything else is available, including the ceramic brakes. So check out that eBay store if you want anything, or you can send me an email. To begin, what we need to do is clean this up, because when you're welding aluminum, your surface has to be extremely clean. Remember I talked about that aluminum oxide before that forms? Well, you've got to clean that off right before you weld. And of course, this still has some seam sealer and paint, and then this has a bunch of E-coat on it, aka primer. So we're gonna clean this up really, really well so we can lay down a real nice bead here and weld up some of this, and then we're gonna seam seal over that when we're all finished. So let's get to it. All right, guys, it's time to start welding. So I don't profess to be any type of professional welder, but we're gonna give this a shot. So we're gonna start by basically welding the floor pan into the cast front structure here. So we're gonna put a weld here, and then there's actually a little weld here. And if it goes well, I might kind of finish this off, and then this all gets seam sealed, rinse and repeat for the other side. So if you're curious, the setup I'm using here is a Yes Welder 211P. This is supposedly really good for aluminum. I've never MIG welded before. It is a double pulse synergic MIG welder. So apparently that's pretty good. It keeps the temperature down. I've been doing some test beads the last few days, trying out my luck, seeing if I can just do something that doesn't burn through the metal. So we're gonna give this a shot. Hopefully it goes well. My objective here, or I should say what would look like success for me, is can I just weld this two pieces together without burning through the thinner floor pan? Because this is several millimeters thick and this is only about 2 millimeters thick. And so the hard part is getting the heat right so that you don't plow through this piece while trying to weld here. So we're gonna give it a shot. Wish me luck, and let's see how it goes. So the front end was pretty frustrating, not gonna lie. Had a really hard time trying to weld the thin metal to the extra thick casting upside down. So I'm gonna take a break from that, and I'm gonna weld in the inside of the car, which hopefully will go a little bit better. So from the factory, you might remember when I removed the front that this piece here was actually welded to the floor. So we do have some bond in here, but I don't know how well this stuck down. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean this up and clean up over here because it was welded also to the side. And then I'm gonna try to weld this down. So wish me luck. Hopefully I'll go better than the front. I am by no means an expert welder at all. I don't have a lot of welding experience, so kind of trying this out, see how it goes. Yeah, let's give it a shot.
It's at this point that my microphone stopped working, but what I'm trying to say here is the welds, while okay, just really didn't penetrate into the base plate very much. It was just too thick, and I couldn't get it to penetrate and also not burn back the floor pan. So I had a lot of trouble there, and there's some times where you just got to put your hat in your hand and call in some reinforcements. So it was this point that I actually called in a friend who's a semi-professional welder to come help me out. So what I decided to do while I wait is to start trying to do some seam sealer. So I marked off areas that need to be sealed in gold. That's why you see kind of gold around. I used the parts car and marked off everything, and then you have to actually clean off some of the primer so that you can apply the seam sealer effectively and get a really good bond. But before, let's talk about what we're using. So we're using a 3M 2-part epoxy primer, and this is supposedly pretty good, and it comes with a fun little tip called a ripple tip. And this is also by 3M, and it's designed to go with this manual setup and give you that nice rippled bead look to kind of imitate the factory. So I've marked it off. I'm going to start by cleaning off the front, and then we're going to get after it.
I was super unhappy with the seam sealer. Just looked terrible. And even though you're not going to see it under the car, because this is all going to be wheel, tire, fender, wheel liners, and everything else. You know, if you're going to do it, you really should do it right. So I used my wire wheel and I just took off the majority of the seam sealer, although I left the actual seam sealed. But what I've ordered is a much better gun that's actually an aerosol gun that's going to help spray a nice bead around all these edges, and then I can actually use it to do sound deadening pads too. So that's going to come in the next few days, and while we're waiting for that, we had our welder come in to help out getting some of these welds done. So let me show you that. So after a lot of welding, which you probably just saw in the montage. We managed to get the floor welded in. Doesn't look great, but it's functionally very good. We had a lot of trouble doing this, as you could probably see from all the video I just showed. So lesson learned is it is just very hard to weld this stuff. You know, even though it's aluminum and it should be pretty straightforward, we did really, really clean prep surfaces. It just wasn't welding as well as we wanted. So these are done, and you can see over on the side is done as well, which that's really the important one. These are just to help secure the floor. So underneath the car, story is pretty much the same. We managed to get the weld done, at least between the lower panel and the casting. The problem is this is just really, really thick, and this is really thin. So it was struggling to get a good bead on here. And you can see this one's a little better because he was working where I hadn't already tried to weld. But what I found was interesting, and my welds weren't all that bad after all that. So although it's frustrating because we got it done, it doesn't look great, but functionally it should be okay, and it's all gonna be covered in seam sealer. The silver lining to all this is, even after only a few weeks of practicing, I managed to get welds pretty similar to what we ended up doing with the professional welder. So that makes me feel a little better. Bummer is, you know, it's just really challenging to weld. It took us a while just to get it to this point. So let me show you the sides though. So the biggest pain was actually the sides. We tried many, many times, and the welder would start the arc, start laying down a bead, and it would just cut out. So I don't know if it was just contamination or what was going on with this, but it proved to be just a real pain in the butt. So we managed to get some done here, but I just decided, you know what, the only important thing, because this is all cosmetic, this isn't structural at all, is that these two panels don't move relative to each other, because then when we put Bondo over this, that'll then crack the Bondo. So what I'm actually gonna do now is I'm just going to fill this with structural adhesive. I'm gonna grind this down so it's flat, and then we can Bondo it, and I'm gonna fill this with structural adhesive and then put a little bit more in the crack down here, and do the same thing on the other side, because I am done trying to weld on this. I don't know how Porsche fixes these, but you know, I had a professional come in too, and it just wasn't working very well. So maybe there's a trick, we don't know. Certainly leave a comment below if there's something we're missing. But for now, we're gonna clean this up, and we're gonna put some structural adhesive in there, and we're gonna finish this up so that we can move on to paint finally. So let's get to it. It's the next day, and the epoxy looks really good. So it's nice and dry. It filled in the crack really well, and these are quite stiff together. So this is gonna be good because I can just sand this down, put some Bondo in it, and then we can paint over it. So underneath, story is similar. I went ahead and just epoxied everything, used the structural adhesive in here, because why not? I already had the adhesive bottle open. There were some holes between, or I should say gaps, between the floor pan, the casting, and the front structure. So I just filled it in with some adhesive, but I'm gonna go ahead and seam seal over all this. So it might add some extra structure, it may not, but it just was kind of fun to do anyway. So after all the struggles with welding, busting out the adhesive really helped. And then we can see on this side, it looks pretty good too. So this actually ended up going really well, I think. This should fill in nice with Bondo, and then we'll get this body line in, and we're gonna shoot in some of the stone guard afterwards. So we're gonna actually have to take all this off for paint anyway. That's gonna be it for today's video, guys. We got a lot of work done on the GT3. We finished up those welds. We ended up using some more structural adhesive to close out the gaps on the side skirts. And of course, we tried to do some of that seam sealer work, but no worries. I've got a new gun on the way. Should be here in the next day or so, and then we can go ahead and finish up that front end. But for now, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, because we've got new content coming every week.